Hello everyone, Jester Bell here, aka Female Frodo Baggins, and for years now on this channel I have done some big videos talking about female characters and how they've been treated by Hollywood. I've talked about the hypocrisy and all of the expectations and restrictions put on writing female characters. I did multiple videos on that. I've done videos talking about girl bosses and why the trope does not work, and recently a video on why that trope has only caused resentment to female action heroes after years of pushing this trope and after the inequality of doing it, where, as I pointed out, oftentimes this trope, particularly pushed by Disney, would include elevating the female characters in a very superficial way and putting down the male characters. But the key here is how superficial these female characters would be, as their idea behind them was supposedly that we are either promoting or affirming how strong women are, but they would result in characters that a lot of people did not like. These kinds of characters were identifiable by these tropes. Number one, many of these characters were Mary Sue's, which is self-insert characters that don't actually have a lot to them and that everyone automatically loves and have all these inexplicable abilities, but don't actually have any development or growth as characters. Other tropes that identified these characters were, interestingly, it sort of became this idea that female characters cannot have love interests or that somehow makes them less strong. We saw that especially with Disney productions. And we also once again saw that oftentimes the male characters would be depleted in order to have their roles taken over by a spunky, bright-eyed female character. So there would be an inequality there that would also cause resentment to these characters. But mainly at its core, these characters were presented with the goal of affirming that yes, women can be strong, they are strong, and that we should embrace these characters. Why? Because they promote that message, but none of them work. This trope had been brimming up for years, honestly. I first remember seeing it all throughout my teen years, where it seemed that every TV show I watched, there was always a litmus test given to every female character on whether or not they were strong and independent. But I think it really kicked off after the Me Too movement and how that changed things in Hollywood, how it got other people in positions of power, and how they would then promote these tropes. Like, Disney went through a lot of leadership changes right before this started to happen. But it was really a Hollywood-wide thing, and I would just like to a minute address and list all of the strong female characters that Hollywood tried and failed to promote. Okay, I was originally going to present this video listing all of these strong female characters that Hollywood tried and failed to promote, but I realized that there were so many to look up, and to make sure that I had covered all of them would take me a lot more time. So let me just try to list them all. These are all the strong, independent women that Hollywood tried to push into the mainstream. Female Ghostbusters, Birds of Prey, Ray, OSHA, Harley Quinn, Captain Marvel, The Marvels with Photon and Miss Marvel, Scarlet Scarab, Asha, Raya, the revamped version of Astrid from How to Train Your Dragon. Yes, the original one was strong, but the new version created new scenes to make sure that that was emphasized even more, with her wanting to become the leader. Snow White, and various other Disney princesses and remakes went through some significant changes from their original portrayals for their new versions. Originally, the plan for the DC universe was to go forward with a Batgirl and Supergirl movie in order to capitalize on this trend. That's not to mention the various Netflix movies that were made also to capitalize on this trend. Various Disney productions, in fact, practically all of them, went through changes to their franchises that made sure to emphasize the female characters, like in Indiana Jones once again, and the Cars franchise. And even this year, there was going to be attempts at that in the films that we see went through a lot of changes, which I'll talk about. So it was years and years of these female characters and groups that nobody liked and that people pushed back against, but just kept on coming and coming regardless of how people felt about it. And you were shouted down and called names and made out to be an evil person, no matter how you expressed the problems with how these female characters were written. At this point, it seems like that era might be coming to an end, as it seems that Hollywood has to finally contend that the way that these female characters were being promoted Hollywood was anti the audience. No one liked these characters and they weren't working. So some movies this year went through some reworks in response to that. For example, Snow White was reworked in order so that Snow White would get a love interest this time. It was clearly edited into the film, even though it was way too late for that and it came off as shoehorned. But another film that was heavily reworked this year by Disney was Fantastic Four. For those who don't know, they were really playing up in the marketing that it was going to explore gender dynamics, that Sue Storm was going to be the central character, and there was going to be those kinds of elements in the film with her really pushed to the forefront. But the final film really didn't seem like that at all. She gets this big moment at the end where she is the one who sacrifices herself and saves the day, which was not built up in the final cut at all. But the original version, we do have confirmed there were scenes that were playing her up, her role in this world a lot more, that were cut from the film. So I do think that Hollywood is having a reaction to this stuff, and Disney has a reaction to this stuff, and they are sort of in a tailspin trying to correct all these female characters. But something interesting has happened in the midst of all of this. All of these failed female characters, strong independent women, female action heroes that have been pushed for years now. There is a new franchise in the works. It is called K-Pop Demon Hunters. For those who don't know, this is an animated film from Sony Animation that was released on Netflix, and it has become a sensation. It is what it sounds like. It stars a trio of girls who hunt demons while doubling as K-pop singers, where their song actually helps create a barrier to protect their world from the demons. And this movie has become such a sensation amongst little girls specifically. Little girls love this movie to the point where some people are calling it the next Frozen. It's on its way to becoming the #1 most watched movie on Netflix. It's getting a limited theater release, which is already sold out in some areas to the point where theaters are asking for more screenings. It's getting sequels. Everyone is saying that this is the new billion-dollar franchise. It's a huge sensation. But I want to bring up here, isn't it ironic? Because for years, people have been pushing back against strong female characters and how they've been pushed. And other people have said that all of this is just due to people's anger at women and that they hate women and that they don't want them to succeed and they don't want female action heroes. And that has created a fear from me that it means that the pendulum might swing back too far. It means that there might be so much pushback that there are never female action heroes again, even though the problems in the beginning were bad intentions and bad writing. But here we have a new franchise, and it's the first new franchise that we've had in, I don't know, a decade that isn't a horror, that is really making people gravitate towards it, that is going to get sequels, that is going to get merchandise, and is becoming a big sensation very organically amongst people, and it is one that stars female action heroes. Well, isn't that wild? And isn't it wild that this movie is doing what Disney once did years ago when they create a sensation with Frozen, perhaps unawares, and now this movie from Sony Animation is stealing its thunder. But what does K-Pop Demon Hunters do that all of these Disney and Hollywood films don't? Well, I want to say this movie actually treats its audience with respect. First of all, the 3 characters in this movie, Rumi, Mira, and Zoe, they don't have any of the bad tropes that those strong female characters from Disney and all these other studios did. The 3 characters have distinct personalities. Zoe is the funny and insecure one, Mira is the serious one, and Rumi is more like the every girl character that everyone can relate to who is dealing with her own shame. It is all distinct personalities. They all have a very natural, fun chemistry with each other. It did what all of these other productions could never do, which is actually create a camaraderie amongst the girls, a chemistry that actually feels fun and natural. The characters are not being made as characters that are there to promote this idea, this very condescending idea that characters need to exist in movies to constantly yell at the audience, yell at girls in the audience that you can be strong. You are strong. And you need these movies to tell you you are strong or you won't remember that you are strong. That was the entire thing with promoting strong female characters. It was this idea that, this very condescending idea that girls are strong, yes, but also they need these movies to remind them that they are strong. That was the entire point of those characters. And those characters expected the audience to embrace them just for the fact that they existed, just for the fact that they were there, without giving people really display any kind of reason for that. But K-pop Demon Hunters does not feel like it is there to blast that message in your mind. It doesn't feel like it's there to tell you about being strong and how you are strong and should be strong or anything like that at all. It's just there to tell a human story. It treats its female characters like actual characters, not just females. But the characters incidentally just have their strengths and weaknesses on display so that we can relate to them and root for them based on that. They are not cardboard cutouts just trying to scream a message at people. In other words, it feels like the people behind the scenes actually had inspiration and creativity behind this rather than just an idea that we will promote this message and this message will be successful no matter what, and that is our goal. We don't actually have a story to tell. It's treating their mostly little girl audience with respect, that they are presenting characters for them to hopefully like, not just a condescending message. Notice how girls have gravitated towards this movie where they're actual characters over all of these other quote-unquote characters that Hollywood has shoved in their faces for years with just the one idea that this is strong and you will be strong. But I have to say, as another reason for why this movie works so well is, well, it actually took into consideration the things that little girls like. I mean, for example, the little girls have a fantasy of being action heroes too. It just looks different than the boys' fantasy. A little girl's fantasy of being an action hero is you get to fight off monsters with your best friends while doubling as a K-pop singer. This is exactly something that caters to the little girl fantasy. You get to fight off demons and wear awesome pop star costumes, and there's songs and all that kind of stuff in this movie. Like, this is everything that little girls want. They want to imagine fantasies with having their bestest of best friends. I remember when I was younger, a lot of projects aimed at little girls, including Disney projects, made sure that there was always a best friend character, because little girls, that's a big fantasy. Having your bestest of all besties by your side. That's part of the reason why Frozen did so well, because the sister dynamic was so relatable to them. That is why it caught on so much with little girls. But yeah, it's flashy costumes and music, a best friend dynamic that really works. I know other movies tried it and it didn't work like this. And yes, it actually has a romance. Do you hear that, Jennifer Lee? Girls like romance. And I know that other movies, once again, they kind of tried to do a bad boy romance. It was really forced and it was really just cringe to people. K-pop Demon Hunters did the bad boy romance correctly. One that matters to the character's development, one that makes sense, and one that even adds in a little redemption at the end and is not trying to glorify any sort of bad relationship or anything like that. But it's the exact opposite of what all these other movies used to do. The other movies kept, and I'm going to say this a lot, it's like what so much of Hollywood has become is they're trying to cater away from people's instincts. They're trying to cater away from what people want and say, no, you want this. No, people don't want the fantasy of having a love interest. Little girls or grown women, they do not want the fantasy of being interested in a boy or a man, whatever the case may be. They want to just be by themselves and independent islands. But that is not the case as shown in the response to this movie. It has never changed that girls in general, young and old, all do like that traditional kind of romance in films, but they've just been pretending like they don't want it. So to review, flashy costumes, music, friendships, romance, K-pop Demon Hunters just hit it all out of the park in terms of what women want. When you look at these other kinds of movies, they had like ugly, frumpy costumes, dynamics that didn't really work with each other, a complete lack and rejection of romance. It's the exact opposite, and it's embarrassing for these companies because it's like, here it was the entire time where now we have a brand new franchise. It mainly appeals to little girls, but there are a lot of people who have become fans of this new franchise. And this movie, in a lot of ways though, even though the animation is very creative, it just goes back to older tropes that work, like giving the main character an actual character arc. You don't always have to have an arc, but it works here. Having a love interest, all of those kinds of things. It just finally gave the audience what they want. It gave its own female audience what they want, and it wasn't trying to be condescending or message heavy. Meanwhile, it seems that behind the scenes, they still don't really get it. Like, you know why I felt something for Rumi's storyline in the K-pop movie? Well, it's because it was well built up. I understood this is a character, this is her personality, this is her conflict, how is she going to resolve it at the end of the film? And that was her journey. Meanwhile, a film like Fantastic Four, I got presented Sue Storm is a person, I guess. She exists in this world. Everyone listens to her for some reason. And by the end of the film, she sacrifices herself and saves her child, and then she gets brought back to life. Spoilers. Some people were upset with me in my review of Fantastic Four because I said that didn't work, because they said, well, Sue Storm is being a mother here. Isn't it virtuous for her to be a mother and to protect her child? There's nothing wrong with that. Writing-wise, there was some things wrong with that, because when I watch a movie, you have to do more than just say, look, a mother protecting her child. Isn't that wonderful? That is the same problem that has gone with the girl boss trope for so many years. Is it wrong for women to be strong? No. But just saying, here is a woman, here is her being strong, you should be strong too, does not create any emotional connection between me and the character in the film. It's just nothingness. You needed to take Sue Storm on an arc in that film, on a development. Was she feeling weaker than others and more incapable, and then she really comes through at the end? That is an arc you could do. What is this of her being the sole person to save the day at the end? What is this a payoff to? That is what is going to get me to care about this particular character and developing who she is. But just having it there and just doing something that by itself is an altruistic act in a vacuum, that in and of itself does not get me to care about a character. So while other companies like Disney, they have completely lost their audience on this sort of thing. Disney used to be on top of everything in terms of getting the little girls fans of their movies and such. But now they have been dethroned as the huge franchise that girls are just going crazy after all these years of nonsense. So the question now is, now what though? Because after all of this turmoil for a decade, it ended that Disney really damaged their brand. All these companies damaged their brand. And we finally got a franchise with female action heroes that are actually good characters that the audience actually likes. It actually is a pretty positive future, because it seems like we're not going to face a future where female action heroes don't exist at all because companies overreact. But it's kind of like, now what though? Because I still see people on the internet, at least, complaining that we might not see these female action heroes that weren't successful ever again. And it's like, yeah, why should we? What are you so upset about exactly? None of these female characters who are trying to preach these messages of being strong in such a superficial and even toxic way worked. So why would you bring them back and keep forcing them at the audience in these franchises that have already destroyed so much goodwill from people in the first place? And why are you so concerned about promoting female action heroes in these films that, once again, these ones didn't work, when we have a new franchise available that is working for people, and that you could just create more like that? That's why I just do not take anyone seriously who is still clinging on to these old failed female action heroes, because it's like, what are you advocating for anyway? Like, it's not because we need more strong female characters on screen. We have some successful ones already. Why are you trying to force these bad ones on us constantly? Honestly, these bad female characters are just going to fade away from memory, and film historians will talk about the past of where they were once pushed, as it is going to become more and more successful to disparage them and acknowledge this as a point of time in history. But where will female characters go now after all of this mess? Yeah, we have a new franchise of female action heroes that is actually working, but it is one franchise. What can we see next from all this stuff? Well, Hollywood's in a really weird place right now where it's like they're trying to finally acknowledge what people actually want from films, but so many of these films were already in development for years. That's why we've had so many of them, especially from Disney, that went through major reshoots and re-edits as they're trying to now soften themselves and try to cater to what people actually want. But it's like, when are you going to start developing franchises that people want to see again? That is still a long ways away, and it remains to be seen if we're finally going to get some creative freedom for female characters where they can just be portrayed as any way that the writers want them to portray them and as more than just messages, or if there's still a lot of this poison in the well and that there's still going to be all of these expectations for how female characters could be portrayed. but maybe for the first time in history, I'm a little bit more hopeful for the future. It is sad that so many of these franchises that I grew up loving, so many films, have just gone downhill so much that another studio had to rise up and essentially take their audience, as all these other characters that I once loved has been ground to dust. But I also want to keep an open mind and be careful not to hold on to the old stuff so much, and just keep an eye out for the future and these new films that could have new influence as we're trying to recover from the Girlboss era. But what do you guys think? Do you think the Girlboss era is done? Do you think that we still have years ahead of us of trying to correct the damage done by all of this? Let me know in the comments below. Once again, thank you patrons and members for supporting me on this channel. What videos do you want to see from this channel in the future? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time.